During the early years of the legendary television program 60 Minutes, one of its correspondents, Harry Reasoner, was at the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral, conducting a series of interviews about America's attempt to land a man on the moon. After he was finished with his interviews, he took one of the first handheld cameras and went walking down a long hallway. Halfway down the hallway, he stopped to chat with the janitor. He looked at the janitor and asked a question. "And sir, exactly what do you do here?" Without even pausing to consider the question, the janitor looked at him and said, "Mr. Reasoner, my job here is to put a man on the moon." And when you think about it, that's exactly what he did.
Right down US-1. Eagle Houston, going right down the track. Everything's great.
Are great leaders born or made? What traits and qualities do those who have greatness possess? How can you achieve greatness in your career? For the answers to these questions, watch closely as Jason Jennings examines the issues of leadership and discovers how to find a parade and get in front.
Let me show you some pictures. Winston Churchill, the school prankster, later the personification of resistance to tyranny and symbol of the free world's opposition to Nazi Germany. Golda Meir. Did you know that she was a former Milwaukee, Wisconsin school teacher and went on to become one of the founders and prime ministers of Israel? Do you recognize the distinctive beard? Abraham Lincoln. But did you know he was both a failed lawyer and later a failed storekeeper who then set the course that inevitably led to the abolition of slavery through the 13th Constitutional Amendment? And I'll bet you recognize this man, Martin Luther King Jr., a man whose tireless efforts on behalf of the civil rights struggle in America helped create tomorrows and possibilities where few had existed before. Nearly 70 years ago, the American journalist Haywood Broun wrote that as every conviction begins with a whim, every leader must serve an apprenticeship as a crank. He ended by saying that a fanatic is a great leader who's just entering the room. Let me show you a few other pictures, a bit closer to home. Leaders in the media. Do you know this man? He pieced together a few cable systems, television and radio stations, bought a motion picture studio and the world's largest chain of video stores, and created Viacom, one of the world's largest media companies. His name? Sumner Redstone. What about this one? A cigar merchant originally from Philadelphia who put together a few ragtag radio stations, put some talented people under contract, and single-handedly created CBS, Bill Paley. How about him? He inherited a bankrupt billboard company upon the death of his father, but today his networks are known around the world as CNN. Ted Turner, one of media's most well-known leaders. Finally, what about this man? He transformed a sleepy newspaper in Adelaide, Australia, into one of the largest media companies in the world and still growing, with everything from the Fox television network to TV Guide, from satellite broadcasting in China and Europe to newspapers virtually circling the planet. You know him as Rupert Murdoch. Have you ever considered the qualities that leaders have in common? I have. In fact, I've studied the subject for nearly 20 years, and what I've learned might surprise you. I know that you have the potential to be a leader. You might be asking if you're watching the right program. After all, you thought this one was about sales and new business development. What's all this information about leadership? Well, the fact is, traditional sales are deader than Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman.
I do not like the slick sales guy. And we get, for whatever reason in our industry, we get a lot of the guy with the, the double-breasted suit and the, the perfect tie and the perfect jewelry and all those things. And it seems to me that the person may be more interested in looking good than having the right product. So I would rather, not that a coat and tie is appropriate, I think it is, but I think some of these people just are a little too fancy for me and almost like give the impression that once I sell you, I'm out of here.
The most successful broadcast account executives and managers are no longer stereotypical salespeople running around with lollipops in their pockets and balloons in their hands, but instead real leaders who take their clients where the clients would like to go, but would be afraid or unwilling to go by themselves. If you're going to be successful, you're going to have to be a leader. And if you're successful at leadership, there's no reason your picture can't be right here. Maybe some leaders are simply born, but for the rest of us, the experts agree. We can study the traits shared by great leaders and apply their strategies, their tactics, and their beliefs, the same things that have made them great, to our lives.
And what I would suggest is that in today's world, you have to be a leader and a manager. That is, you've got to be concerned with change, you've got to be concerned with tomorrow, you've got to adapt the organization to the different external environments that are occurring, but also you've got to be able to deliver. You've got to be able to organize, you've got to be able to plan, you've got to be able to produce. And the ability to produce and to plan for change has to occur at every level in the organization.
Dr. David Bradford has spent his career studying, writing about, and teaching leadership. On the campus of the Stanford Graduate School of Business, where he's taught for nearly 30 years, Dr. Bradford says that leadership can be taught.
You know, to put it in extreme terms, there's no gene for leadership that we found. And if you think of the components of leadership, if leadership is trying to figure out how to change an organization, it's looking a little bit into the future and trying to adapt to what needs to occur. It's starting to develop a vision of what we need to be. I think these are learnable skills. Vision is not a slick statement. Values are not 9 statements that are pasted in the wall or put into a plastic card that you put in your lapel pocket. Too many organizations spend too much time wordsmithing a phrase, coming up with the 7 phrases. A vision is an agreement within the organization of who we are, what we stand for, and where we're going. And paradoxically, organizations that have a good sense of their vision and of values will have members using different words to describe the same vision.
Let's see if the following definition of leadership is close to what our experts are talking about. This is the dictionary definition of the word leadership. It says, to cause to go with by guiding or showing the way, to guide by persuasion, example, or argument. The thousands of leaders I've had the opportunity of working with around the world have even shortened that to simply say this: leadership is taking people where they want to go, but probably wouldn't consider going by themselves. Well, now that we have an idea of what leadership is, how do we get it working in our own lives? After decades of study, I think I know the 3 primary characteristics and the 8 traits that set leaders apart from followers. Let's talk about them. A couple of years ago, I hiked in the Great Wall of China. What a remarkable structure. One of only 2 man-made creations visible from outer space. Nearly 4,000 miles long, requiring hundreds of years to build. Whose idea was it? And what did that person possess? And imagine a great athlete like Jesse Owens setting world records under impossible circumstances. Lots of people are blessed with athletic talents, but what did Jesse Owens and other gold medal winners have besides their natural athletic ability? The answer in each is that the leader has a vision. What's yours? What's your big dream? What's your reason for existence? Which idea is perceived so vividly in your imagination that it drives you through life? A vision is our reason for existence. There's an important business corollary that's as old as the Bible itself. You've heard it before. In Proverbs chapter 29, it says, "Where there is no vision, the people shall perish." As someone who has spent his lifetime studying and teaching on the subject of leadership, Perhaps the best advice I can give you on the subject is this. In business, you begin by dividing all the players into two groups, those with a vision and those without. Then you discount those without a vision because they won't achieve anything of significance or provide serious competition to you in your quest for success. If you want to lead, you need a vision. And if it isn't a subject which you've given much thought before now, this is the time to begin. The experts say your vision should be big, and if need be, unreasonable.
The word we use for it is we say what you want is a tangible vision. And we use those words purposely because they're contradictory. Because tangible you can touch, a vision you can't. And a vision has to have so much reality you feel like you can almost touch it, but you can't really grab it. That's a sort of tension. And I think what a good vision is it's taking the purpose of the organization and it's putting it in inspiring terms. And let me try an analogy that a colleague of mine came up with. If you've ever built a house, you've got to have a set of blueprints. But the blueprints don't excite you. What excites you is when the builder paints a picture of the living room with the fire and sitting there in an evening and how this house is going to be to live in. That's the vision that allows you to pay more money than you thought you were going to pay. But you've also got to have blueprints to build the house. So we need strategic plans, we need mission statements, but it's not the sort of thing which excites people. And so a vision is taking the purpose and putting it in exciting and challenging terms.
Famed playwright and critic George Bernard Shaw wrote, "For any change of any value, look to the unreasonable person. The reasonable person," he said, "will go along with any environment they find, but the unreasonable person will force the environment to conform to their vision of the way they think things ought to be." When we consider innovations in music, in theater, in computers, in medicine, in government, and in transportation, advances and success have always been achieved by leaders who dared to have a big, and if required, unreasonable vision. The leaders with whom I've worked have all discovered, sometimes through painful trial and error, something else about vision. They've learned that there's a criteria for that which constitutes a valid vision. Seldom is a vision a goal, because what happens after you've reached a goal? The most effective vision is timeless. A vision is never about money. I've never met anyone whose vision was to be rich who actually achieved great wealth. Instead, great financial rewards come from doing something you love and doing it better than anyone else. If you need to communicate a vision to others, it must be easily expressed or understood. Noted business guru Peter Drucker says, "Express it in a sentence or less." I urge my own clients to be able to say it in 7 words or less. You see, if it takes more than 7 words, you'll either forget it, lose sight of it, or be unable to effectively communicate it to others. According to Dr. Charles Handy, noted business professor and author, any vision must have the aha effect. Someone only need hear it once or have it explained to them once, and the reaction is, aha. But of course, if having a vision is vital, the next characteristic of leadership is equally important. Dr. Eileen Serlin, a highly respected psychologist whose practice specializes in issues of business leadership, tells us why you can expect to meet with cynicism as you begin to express and live your vision.
There are a couple of reasons for cynicism. So one is people have been burnt often in different organizations. We see that a lot, that a lot of promises that aren't kept. Why should I believe anybody this time? And the feeling of having been disappointed over and over. So I think keeping one's word is really important, so that people are finally willing to believe again that this person's going to follow through and make a difference.
Keeping one's word, as Dr. Serlin says, means that you can't just have a vision, you've actually got to act on it. It's mission that sets real leaders apart from dreamers. They know how they're going to live their vision, how they'll fulfill their dream. They have a plan of action, and they embark on it knowing it will be achieved. What's your plan of action for living your dream? How will you accomplish living your vision? In later lessons, we'll help you develop your own personal action plan. The third characteristic of leaders is that they all have a set of values. Values are your principles or standards, those things you believe to be valuable and important in life. Dr. Serlin has some stimulating thoughts on the role of values in the achievement of success and the role of business in identifying those values.
What you see is what you get. Or when I say yes, I mean yes. When I say no, I mean no. I mean, in these very simple things about being what you say you're going to be, keeping your word, knowing your limits, those all have to do with integrity.
Dr. Serlin works with business leaders, helping them achieve their goals and objectives.
Should business name those attributes?
Is it the place of business to be doing that? That's
I don't
the question. I think it's got to be done somewhere. And I think businesses, the old boundaries between work and personal life are no longer holding. I think if businesses can name these things in a way that doesn't encroach on privacy and confidentiality, certain things that everybody in the business realizes is good for everybody in the business, like keeping your word is a good thing. You get happier customers, you get better results that way.
Over the years, I've observed 8 traits shared by those who have achieved big success in business. Now, perhaps each didn't have all 8, but all 8 have been seen frequently enough to warrant our discussion. There's one trait shared by all the great business leaders I've known, and it's best explained this way. Look at this bridge. What would you say it's lost? And what about the building you're seeing now? You would also say it's lost what? It's integrity. And integrity is a most interesting word. We use integrity to describe someone who is honest and filled with moral uprightness. But the word actually comes from the Latin integritas, which is defined as wholeness, completeness, and soundness. But when you put the contemporary usage alongside the historic root meaning of the word, what you end up with is someone who is moral and honest all the time. Almost all leaders share another key characteristic: sacrifice. A true leader is so committed to his or her vision that they're prepared to sacrifice immediate pleasure or reward for the certainty of long-term success and fulfillment of their vision. History is filled with stories of courageous leaders who sacrificed family, sustenance, and faced near insurmountable sacrifice on behalf of their vision and their integrity. No matter how tempted, they knew taking the wrong deal would compromise their cause, their vision, their integrity forever. Consider this man, Nelson Mandela, and the more than 20 years he spent jailed because he had a vision that apartheid was wrong. Had he just promised to back off his vision and go along with the status quo, he could have been released from prison and led a very prosperous life. But because of his steadfast belief in his vision, his mission, and his values, he sacrificed. The prize? A free South Africa was his in the end. The sacrifice, because of his principles, was a long wait. The good news is that nobody is going to be asking you to be jailed for 20 years because of your vision, your mission, and your values. But the promise is this: your integrity will be tested nearly every day. In the near future, someone will offer you a deal, one that you instinctively know isn't good for your company or for you in the long run. But there will be a certain immediate appeal associated with getting a deal, any deal, done quickly. Leaders know that occasionally they have to walk away from a piece of business and sacrifice the immediate pleasure of the hit, because to do otherwise would compromise their vision and their values. Con artists take every deal, and they take everyone with them. The next trait, readily recognizable in leaders, is commitment, their pledge, their obligation to successfully complete their undertaking.
It's building in reassurance. It's building a picture of what the future should look like. Leadership is also the process of building alliances across groups. Leadership is painting a picture of the future that people can identify with. I think those are the core components of leadership.
The next trait of leaders, especially those in the sales process, requires a detailed understanding. It's the phenomena of both a word, empathy, and a two-word phrase, ego drive. Empathy is defined as the power of identifying oneself mentally with and fully comprehending another person. Ego drive, on the other hand, is the deep interpersonal need to convince or master the situation. Practically speaking, what does each mean? Well, when a prospect or client looks at you with a bewildered look and says, "I just don't know where the $30,000 is going to come from," someone with empathy feels and understands the emotions being experienced by the client. That's empathy. Now, maybe you've never faced a problem of the same magnitude, but when you're able to reach back inside yourself and remember the time that you didn't know where the mortgage payment was coming from, you didn't know where the rent money was coming from, that's empathy. It is the desire to please, but empathy is more than that. It's the need to create relationships. It's to care for customers as people. Empathy is also humor. It's listening ability. It's tact and follow through.
I understand.
Empathy is also tolerance and enthusiasm.
I'm here with you.
It's cooperation, and it's an inward sense of responsibility.
Yes, sir. And this.
Empathy is versatility, and it's the ability
I'm
to
not gonna
communicate
quote you.
well with anyone.
Let me ask it this way. If you
Empathy is being a caring, compassionate, and considerate fellow traveler.
Is that all right? Thanks, I really appreciate it.
However, a word of caution is called for. Unless empathy is accompanied by an equal dose of ego drive, all you'll ever do is sit around listening to people's problems and never getting any business done. For the leader also possesses an interpersonal need to convince the other party that they can help, that the path, the course of action they're advocating is the proper one. Ego drive demonstrates itself by a strong sense of self-drive, by being inventive, seeking excellence. A person with a strong sense of ego drive is diligent and persistent. They're filled with strong convictions. Someone with ego drive doesn't like surprises. They want to be in control. They have the courage to set big targets. They know how to exploit power. They think under pressure. And with ego drive comes winning confidence, a fiercely competitive individual. If you have ego drive, you demonstrate your stamina. You have belief in the organization. The leader also realizes that time is his or her most precious commodity. I'm frequently questioned by my clients on the subject of time management. Well, the fact is, there is no such thing. Time, you see, is a constant. Everyone has been provided the same amount. There is no magical way to manage time. Leaders know this, and they know they can't afford to waste any of it.
Over the last 7 years of working in the time management industry, I've discovered that most people spend the majority of their time, over 50% of their time, being reactive as opposed to proactive.
Tate has taught thousands of the world's most accomplished business leaders how to manage their time.
Is being reactive like that necessarily a bad thing?
People spend more time responding to things that are in their face, things that are ringing, things that are unexpected but loud. They spend all of this time during their day satisfying the squeaky wheels, so to speak, instead of paying attention to the things that are really going to get them further ahead that are much more silent.
Kim, give us 5 things that people can do, practical steps, to really get a handle on their event management.
The most important thing they could do, number 1, is sit down someplace quiet for at least 10, 15 minutes every single day. This could be in the morning or this could be in the evening. And think about what just took place in the last several hours of their time. Think about what they want to do tomorrow or for their upcoming time period, and then build a plan to get there. And that plan has to include several very deliberate steps. Yeah. Number 1, they have to take a look at where they want to go. So I always tell people they want to clue in on their personal and professional goals. They need to look at those goals every single day so that they can focus in on what matters most. Then based upon those goals, they need to communicate. Because, you know, a lot of our day is spent, hopefully a lot of our day is spent on goal-related activities. But for a lot of us too, we have a lot of maintenance stuff that we have to comply with as well. So they want to touch base with their goals and objectives, but then they also want to talk to the people that they work with. They want to talk to their partners, with their generals, etc., all the soldiers at work, and communicate what's going on, what they hope to have happen, and allow those people to communicate back. So in essence, they're fleshing out any issues that will be coming up during the day. I tell people that they need to flesh them out, be proactive in fleshing them out, instead of focusing just on what you hope to accomplish, and then those things come up unexpectedly. So sit down someplace quiet, think about your goals and objectives, and then go out and talk to the people with whom you work, and then given your priorities and theirs, set down and build a specific daily task list, and those tasks have to be very specific. So make the task list. Then after you make the task list, it's very important that you step back and troubleshoot that list. What could go wrong? Do I have the equipment to follow through? Do I have the people to follow through? Have I set realistic time expectations? Do I have the information to follow through? Think about all of the resources that you need to follow through and prep those resources so that, you know, we can ensure that we're employing our resources correctly. So after you troubleshoot the list, then you've got a really good list happening, and at that point you have to prioritize that list.
And what do you mean by prioritizing the list?
Look at that list and look at all of the tasks relative to one another and determine which of these tasks are A priority versus B priority versus C priority. And of course, that is relative to the big picture in the future. What contributes the most to that big picture versus the least? So it's what's truly vital versus what's more trivial. A lot of people employ the old Pareto principle, and of course that's the old 80-20 rule. Pareto was an Italian economist. I believe he was from Venice. He was Venetian. And he did a lot of studies in business and economics and discovered that about 20%, only about 20% of what happens creates 80% of the results we experience.
If somebody were to put these principles into practice, how much more productive could they become? Put a number on it.
29%. That comes from some third-party research.
Of all the leaders I've worked with and studied over the years, the most successful, those who remain in power the longest, and those with the highest sense of self-esteem, all share 3 other traits. One of them is something that they learned early and the world is now becoming preoccupied with, and that's health, and justly so. But you see, for years, real leaders have known the secret. You aren't able to live your vision and fulfill your mission if you aren't healthy. As a result, they work out and they take care of themselves. Whether it's a regular workout at the gym, a program of walking, running, or swimming, they enjoy regular recreation, healthy eating, and they watch their weight. After all, leaders have an image to uphold. Leaders don't complain about not having enough time to stay healthy. They simply do it as one of the vital daily events requiring their attention. But if health is important to leaders, so is their support structure, their family unit, in whatever form that takes. Whether it's a single mom or dad, a traditional family unit of husband, wife, and children, or someone who's chosen to remain single, each leader knows they must be involved with a group of people who share their vision, their mission, their values. It's called the vision community. According to the experts, it's often lonely being a leader, living a vision, and fulfilling a mission. They say that a support structure of like-minded people who share the vision is important to the mental and physical health of the leader. Finally, a trait that every truly great leader I've known has shared, a belief in something greater than themselves.
The danger is that we become so busy that we are a prisoner to whatever's in our date book, whatever's in our diary. And we know in an organization how disastrous it is to let that kind of scheduling take over and let it run our life. One of the functions that prayer, meditation can play in a person's life is to give him or her a chance to step back out of the immediacy of answering needs and going to meetings and making decisions and doing all those important things, and to say at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, how does it all add up? What's it all about?
The Reverend Dr. Timothy Lull heads the Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary, where students from many denominations study side by side in an innovative program aimed toward their ordination.
My sense is that we would be incomplete without talking about spirituality as one of the key components of leadership.
The hunger for it in our society is manifest. I spend a lot of my time traveling on airplanes, and 9 times out of 10 when I tell people what my vocation is, what I do, we're talking for the rest of the flight. The hunger is widespread. It doesn't mean that everybody's affiliated with religious organizations these days or is able to find spirituality in those contexts, though some of them are. But I think the hunger for some transcendent sense of purpose, for some perspective on one's life, for some sense that at the end of the day, the balance sheet adds up, not just for the organization, but for the individual. That's a major factor. And the question then is, how for busy people with many responsibilities does one find time for this? And what's helpful? The most important thing is habit. If I have to make an existential decision every morning whether to brush my teeth or not, it's not going to go very well with my teeth. I mean, if I'm going to take good care of them, I have to have an internalized priority. And if I think it's important for me to have some spiritual perspective, some spiritual discipline, some self-criticism of what I'm doing in my life and my work and how those things fit together, I've got to find my own ways that fit for me, my own regular times, daily or weekly, that I'm able to be reflective, whether that means participation in a religious community, whether it means a pattern of individual meditation or reading or prayer, whatever that might be. If you wait for it to happen spontaneously, then of course the bottom falls out and there's nothing in the bank. You haven't built up a kind of habit of being able to do it. I'm something of an expert in Martin Luther, and I find his life interesting because he was, in his own way, a leader under a lot of pressure and a man extraordinarily busy with all the different responsibilities that he had. And he says repeatedly in his writings, the busier I am, the more important it is to find time to pray. It sounds like a kind of religious, pious cliche, and yet I think people who live with a great deal of responsibility in life know how important that is.
So there you have it, the 3 characteristics of leadership which have withstood the test of time: a vision, a mission, a set of values, and 8 principles or standards which leaders consider vital to their being able to lead: integrity, sacrifice, commitment, empathy and ego drive, event management, being part of a vision community or family, health and fitness, spirituality. Oh, our title, Find a Parade and Get in Front. What does that mean? Well, it means that you should find a cause, something you believe in, because there are people ready to believe in something, maybe even you. And all people are waiting for is for someone to get in front and lead the way. But those words again, find a parade, exactly what do they mean? And why have I chosen this metaphor to add to our definition of leadership? Well, first, find a parade represents the simplicity inherent in good marketing. Great marketers see things for what they are, project what they will be, and work to make the most of them. They don't try to invent demand where none exists, or choose the most difficult course instead of working with the flow. Finding a parade reminds us that we're in a commercial enterprise that relies on mass appeal. This creates a contrast to the view of leadership only as someone swimming against the current, because good economic leadership implies customers, just as good social leadership implies followers. In advertising, we must train ourselves to be on the lookout for parades as they're forming. That means studying research, reading trade publications, and thinking about the business consequences of all the mass media trends. For example, the desire for healthier choices, home meal replacement, the internet, customer satisfaction, and hundreds of other trends are examples of parades in formation. In the words of my good friend, noted futurist Joel Barker, vision without action is only a dream. Action without vision is a waste of time. But vision and action together have and will continue to change the world.